Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to the shop. You may remember from the last video, I was installing some kitchen cabinets in the Fuso with these feet from IKEA, and I ran into a bit of an issue. So here's where we are now. I really like the adjustability factor in here. I like being able to thread these up and down, even though I probably don't need it very much. I'm pretty sure the floor in there is not perfectly flat. I already have all these threaded bases attached to the cabinets, so ideally I'd like to keep that part. I like the size of these feet, but I'm not willing to live with the fact that they can separate that easily. And I know there's been some videos where you can see around my shop here and how much junk I have. And there's often good reason for that. And let me show you what I've found. I'm sure you've seen the tool bench that is overfilled with useless stuff. But if we take a walk around the shop, you'll note that I also have corners and shelves full of useless stuff. And useless stuff pretty much everywhere. Well, I also have some stuff hidden in corners that's useful. I have a scrap steel corner up here where all my little strange bits and pieces and offcuts like to hang out. Some of them are thin pieces of angle. Some of them are thick pieces of box tube. Even some really thick pieces of flat bar. And then hiding over here under this old sandblasting cabinet, I had some more pieces way down in the back here. Let me try and get some more light here. There we go. I don't know what these came from, but at some point I thought, those look useful. So while the IKEA cabinets sat on their side in the truck, waiting for me to figure things out, I eyed this piece of steel right here. And I thought, you know what? That has a very unique shape and is a pretty useful size. So I think I'm going to make some new feet out of this. And while it may not look like very thick steel, it's pretty comparable to what the original foot is made of. It's also a very structural shape with a couple of flanges bent into it, and it's got a base plate welded to the bottom that'll keep it from spreading apart. So, measured it up, and it looks like there's enough there to make several feet that are about 2 to 3 inches wide. I'm going to polish all the light rust off of this, and I'm going to cut it into 2-inch sections. And I'm going to break out a new tool that I just picked up to turn these into feet. If only I had a workbench I could work on instead of working on the floor, eh? Huh. Now all I'm really interested in here is kind of this channel part, probably with this base plate on it. I'm going to be cutting the ends off because I don't have a use for this hole, and then I'll just cut 2-inch sections here. But I don't want this angle lip on here. So I'm going to switch over to my zip disc, and I'm going to trim this all the way down here. Now, ideally I don't like using zip discs. I would much prefer to cut this in my saw, but that's a long cut, and it's just going to be the quickest way to do it. So it's going to be the zip disc. And of course, what you have just seen has been performed by semi-non-professionals. Don't attempt to do anything that you've seen me do. Never defeat any safety equipment on any of your tools, and always wear your PPE. You may have noticed that there are a number of spot welds down the flange here, and because I'm only making a 2-inch wide strip, I will be missing some of those spot welds. So before I can go and cut this into 2-inch pieces, I'm going to give a quick little, not grind, but a cleanup of this edge, and I'm going to throw some stitch welds down here so that when I cut it apart, this bottom plate doesn't just fall off. There are a couple areas on here that when I'm cutting into 2-inch pieces, I'm going to avoid, like the area that you see down here that you probably saw when I started cleaning. There's a nice big dent here, but I do have a bit of extra material, so I have enough, even with cutting the ends off and not using that damaged section down there. Should still have enough to make all the feet that I need. So now that I've got those seams welded, I'm going to grind them down and then we can cut these into slices. Now I know there's going to be people out there that say you shouldn't weld structural stuff downhand. The thickness of this material, this isn't really structural. There is plenty of heat going into that, as you can see. If I can keep my camera focused in the right place. That was all welded in one pass. It is literally the two pieces just being melted together. Really doesn't even take much filler. But it's a pretty quick weld, downhand or downhill. It works for what I'm doing. Let's grind the excess off and cut them up in the saw. What do you mean you had to grind your welds off? Well, let's be realistic. That was very quick and very easy to do with both the welding and the grinding. Could I have pulled out my TIG welder and spent an hour and a half doing that and making it look absolutely beautiful? Sure. But who's going to see it? It's going to be under the cabinet, my yelling, and under the floor. I'm pretty sure that's going to do the trick. You know, is it perfect? No. Is it dead straight? No. Are you going to see it after this? Well, yeah, it's all over YouTube and the internet. But are you going to see it in reality? It's going to be under the cabinets, likely covered up with some flooring, and you're never going to see it. So it's fine by me. Let's get to cutting. And now the age-old question of which way up should I cut it? I can cut it this way. The downside being, as my blade gets closer to the bottom, it comes more parallel with this surface, which here is quite long, which means I'd be dragging a lot of teeth across a long surface, and I don't really want to do that. I could do it this way, which gives me a good angle, but again, when I get to the bottom, I've got a long surface to cut across with the blade almost parallel. So I think I'm going to do it this way. It gives me a good angle when I'm going through this long surface. Both of the vertical sides will only be going through a very thin wall, and that leaves me with the narrowest profile to get the blade when it's parallel at the bottom. That means I need to come in a little over 2 inches here for my first cut so that I can clear this hole, and then it'll be 2-inch cuts after that. With all the cuts made, it's now time to remove the bad sections. And of course, we're going to put the no good sections in the scrap bin, not in the corner of the shop. Oh, that's hard to do. And oh, it's cold out here. And not that much warmer in here. So I better get to work again. There's a number of different ways that we can go about deburring the edges of these. And most common is going to be flat disc on a grinder, and that does a great job going around the edges. But it does get kind of hard when you have corners, especially inside corners, or areas that this flat disc can't quite get into. You've seen me use this in the past on plastic, but this is my deburring tool, and these are awesome. Stick it along the edge, slide it, and it just slices the very edge, the burr off of it. This is a great tool. As you know, I'll put a link in the video description if you're looking for one of these. Second option, and this is one of my new favorite tools, is a mini belt sander. And this fits right in along the edges, and you just use it like a belt sander, but it can get right into the square corners where the round disc can't get. Now that we've got the basic metal shape sorted out, let me explain how the rest of this is going to work. Obviously, the foot before was threaded and these aren't. So I've gone to my favorite place, Amazon, and I've purchased something that's going to change these pieces of metal into actual feet. And that is a bunch of M10 by 1.5 Riv-nuts. Hang on, a what? A Riv-nut. So it's a combination of a rivet and a nut. Looks like a rivet, somewhat, without the stem. It's threaded on the inside. You drill a hole like you would for a rivet, you insert it, and then you use a tool to compress it like you would a rivet, and you end up with a threaded hole in a thin piece of metal. That sounds complicated, and it probably needs a special tool, doesn't it? You're right, it does. Let's take a look at my other Amazon purchase. Bet you thought it was bigger than that. Ooh. So this is a Riv-nut tool, and it's not the bottom of the barrel. It's not the most expensive, but it had some pretty good reviews, and it looks nice and beefy. The idea again here, similar to a rivet, but the rivet would normally have a stem on it. So the way this works is it has a threaded portion. This is probably not the right one, it's not. So you'd thread your Riv-nut on here, and then as you can see, this moves in and out. So you start here, you thread it onto your part, put it in the hole, and then you pull, and it compresses this little ridged section here and secures it into the metal. Let's give it a try. Now I should clarify, I do have other Riv-nut tools. And you may have seen another style of Riv-nut tool. It looks like a rivet gun. The only difference between this style and the one that I've just got is the size that they're able to pull. The reason I purchased a new one is because this doesn't go large enough for the M10 by 1.5. But if you're just looking at standard Riv-nuts like quarter 20s or M6, M8, this style may be able to do it. Now, the Riv-nuts are available in lots of different materials. You can use mild steel, which I'm using for this because the feet are mild steel. You can get aluminum Riv-nuts. And for those, this style will do fine. But you can also get stainless steel Riv-nuts, and they're much harder to pull. The short handle on this style of rivet nut tool, which can also be a standard riveter if you change the bit, doesn't have enough pull, so that has a longer handle and makes it easier to pull the harder rivet material. As I mentioned, there are different sizes, so obviously if you're working in Imperial, this one comes with the Imperial fittings and also a bunch of metric ones. It also comes with a step drill and a number of Riv-nuts that you can use. Not a lot, but it'll get you going. There are a lot of options out there for Riv-nut tools like this. I chose this one because it comes with a wide range of metric and Imperial tools, comes in a decently put together box, has an instruction manual with the all-important section of absolutely forbidden stuff, like allowing a user who is not familiar with this tool and hasn't read the instruction manual to use this. In all seriousness, the manual does have some useful information in it, including a nice chart to tell you what size hole you need for which Riv-nut. These are designed to be a pretty tight fit, so make sure you don't over drill the hole. They don't just slide right in. You do have to you have to get it dead straight, and it's just gonna slide in. You do need a very snug fit, otherwise it will have the risk of coming back out again. With the hole drilled, I've got the Riv-nut installed on the tool with the handle spread apart. We drop this in, and it should be as easy as squeezing the handles. You can see in the back side there, Not the best of lighting. It's kind of mushroomed itself up against the back. We now unthread the tool by spinning the knob at the back. And we now have a foot with a threaded top. And just to prove that it's going to work, it actually does fit the IKEA thread. Look at that! It goes on all the way without pulling itself apart. So, I now have a new adjustable IKEA foot. Well, I've got a couple more holes to drill and a couple more Riv-nuts to install, but I hope you found that video useful. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you got any questions, throw it in the comments section down below. If you think it'll help someone, share the video around. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. Don't forget to check the video description for the links of the products that I've been using. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. All right, now because you stuck around all the way to the end of the video, I have one more little thing to show you. I'm sure some of you are probably concerned that by focusing all the weight of the cabinet right in the center of this span, it may bow down in the middle. Fear not. I foresaw this as well. These feet come apart, as we know, quite easily. We don't need the top, we don't need the bottom, but that's a good support. And this support happens to fit somewhat snugly under here. And with a little 3D print that goes under the bottom that I'll be making shortly, that should add all the additional support that it needs. Thanks for thinking of that, and thanks for sticking around to the end. See you next time.